What's going on, guys? Welcome back to A&E Podcast. Thanks for checking us out as always. We want to give a huge shout out to Underdog for giving us our promo code. If you want to use it, it is ANDE Podcast, all caps, all one word.
I will be giving you guys a quick tutorial video on how to use it. So specifically, I like to bet on NBA, but you could bet on anything from NBA to racing to MMA to even esports. So here you guys go. You can check it out right here. The day that this was recorded, I decided to go with the under for Tari Eason, 29.5 points and rebounds. I went with the over for Evan Mobley, 11.5 points, and Miles Turner, 16.5 points and rebounds. This was preseason, so that might be a long shot for Miles Turner. I decided to put $20 on it. I would have a $120 payout. So if you guys want to check that out, please go ahead. Again, the link will be down below in the description. You can use our promo code, so please do. You will get free money, and so will we. So let's get into the episode. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of A&E Podcast. I'm Tom Ludner.
I'm Bailey Driscoll.
And today we have sports broadcaster John McCarry with us. So, John, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, shout out your social media accounts real quick, go ahead and do so.
Absolutely. So, John Vicari, I'm the voice of the Lake County Captains in East Lake, Ohio. I'm with 92.3 The Fan as well in Cleveland. Of course, born and raised in Queens, New York, friends of these two gentlemen. And on social media, my Twitter, I'm at Vicari John because I couldn't get my first and last name in the right order. And then my Instagram is, I believe, Vicari John with a _under it. So that's my social media.
All right. And, growing up, your social media was always JV1620.
Yes.
Every time I search for your name on Instagram, that's what I look for, and I forget that you had to change it.
You have to brand yourself. It's still, my Xbox and other stuff in life, but it's still iconic. But yeah,
it's an iconic name. Iconic. So we're gonna get right into the questions now. So I want to start off asking you a question. We did grow up together, and I knew that you were always passionate about sports specifically. So I want to ask, what sparked the interest in broadcasting over other things? I know that you ran track in high school, you played football. What made you step away from those kinds of things to pursue broadcasting, especially at 14 and up?
Well, played is very generous. I sat on the bench and broke my arm. But in terms of, athletics, I think at a young age, even before high school, I was, I love sports. You knew that growing up and playing it all day long. But I just had a feeling in the back of my head that, I'm probably not going to go pro at this. It just pretty early on, which I guess you could say is depressing, but that's just how I felt. And then my parents say as young as 6 years old, I voiced wanting to be a broadcaster. And then in high school, getting the chance at St. Francis Prep to do so. And I chose my high school based on, broadcasting. I was in between that and Holy Cross where, obviously, Tom, you went and they
went as well.
I went as well. And they had a great program. And, it was in between that. But I never actually did it, but I felt it was what I wanted to do. And then when I did it in high school, it just blossomed from there. But for some reason, just growing up, watching and listening to all the sports in New York, I just felt and related more with the guys and girls broadcasting it more so than the players.
Yeah, I know that anytime we'd play, games like 2K or Madden, you would be broadcasting. We'd have to mute the game so you could broadcast it. And yeah, as you could see from your high school experience and our high school experience, you're working in a professional setting and we are doing a podcast on YouTube. So there's that from high school. And so I'm going to follow that up. Is there anybody specifically, any broadcaster that, you shaped yourself after and that really inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, there was a ton. Luckily, us growing up in New York, I think that we have the best broadcasters across the board through all the major sports. You could go and list them, but being a Rangers fan, listening to Sam Rosen, he was definitely an influence on me. And I felt a guy who, honestly, I wouldn't say he has the best broadcasting voice, but he has a unique voice and he's just so darn good. And then, the more I would follow sports, the more I would look into these broadcasters and then you'd realize, oh, they're doing a national game and on national television. You can go up and down, but like Ian Eagle, for example, he does the Nets, but he also does the NFL on CBS. He's going to call the March Madness tournament upcoming in 2023, like the finals. Guy from New Jersey, Bob Costas, born and raised in Queens, New York. And then even guys like Michael Kay, Howie Rose with the Yankees and the Mets, Gary Cohen too, all influences and all guys who were like, hey, they're from where you are. They went to similar schools. And yeah, so I mean, I think probably Rosen would be at the top of the list. I've more emulated or wanting to aspire to be a guy like Kenny Albert because he calls every sport. And I think that's just so awesome that he could go one day calling a basketball game and the next day doing a hockey and then doing a baseball game in a week. So he was something or someone that obviously I looked up to. And then, you know, the more I've gotten around, I've been across the country, you realize there's great voices everywhere, but I still would take a New York voice, a New York broadcaster over anybody else because you look, they're getting most of the national roles as well. Yeah,
before we hop into one of Bailey's questions, I actually want to follow up on that as well. So you're doing radio right now. And I know that you did radio in high school as well a lot. Do you want to transition that at all into television? Would you like to be on the screen at some point rather than the voice behind the radio?
You know, it's a tough spot. I wanted to get into minor league baseball, and then I did that out of college, and I'm with the Lake County Captains, and they do not have a stream. So I figure, okay, well, it's minor leagues. They were low A for up until 2021. Now they're high A. It's probably a couple teams that don't have one. Well, they're the only ones in the league that don't have that video component, which it wouldn't really change the how I would broadcast the game, but it's nice to have just that exposure that, hey, you turn on the game, and even if it's a 1 or 2 camera setup, you're hearing my voice and you're watching. And people want to watch nowadays. They do. Podcasts still get listened to, but there's a reason you have a video component with it right now. You want to give people the option to watch if they can. So that's something, that, again, I would like to get into. And it's hard with the career path because, and this is not being, boasting, but it's just people that I know in the industry that I went to college with that are now in these roles. So I think if I went in that specific direction, I could have been. But there's a lot of people I know that are in local TV, local sports, local news, and I could have done that, but I just love doing play-by-play so much, and there's more opportunities on radio than there are in television. But going forward, I want to be able to do both. I want to be doing TV games, and I do love radio a lot, so I want to do radio. I just want to do games. That's where I am in my life and doing stuff like that.
Awesome.
So up to my question now, obviously in high school and even furthermore so now presently, I know you called a lot of big names, like in high school, for example, Cole Anthony, who's now in the NBA, Jose Alvarado, who's now in the NBA. So you've called a lot of people like that. So I'm just wondering, like, who is your favorite person to call? And also, if there's a difference, who's your favorite person to watch live?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. I was talking with a buddy who I know Tom knows. Bailey, I don't know if you know him, but Jaden Becker, who's doing already great things in college and in the broadcast field. And we talked about it, and we're like, we should try and make a documentary on the time we went to high school with the basketball talent that we saw, because literally every team was stacked. And it's one thing to say nowadays, like, oh, these prep schools have stacked teams and they have, 4 guys who are top 100 recruits and whatever. Okay, great. These were schools and these guys grew up in the area. They didn't, transfer. Right. I mean, there's some exceptions where some transferred over and maybe they went to a school a couple towns over. But for the most part, it wasn't guys coming from a different state or a different country migrating to Queens, New York. These guys were Queens guys, and now they're all big shots. I mean, Jose, like you mentioned, Alvarado, Cole Anthony, these are 2 premier NBA guards, and we just were classmates with them, and we thought nothing of it. They didn't have this pedestal. And I know Cole Anthony went to a prep school for his senior year, but most of the guys and some of them in the pros, the Shapenny brothers in there as well, they all 4 years stayed in the high schools that we went to. They went to our graduations, so it's sort of funny to think about that. I mean, definitely, and obviously unfortunate, but there isn't a prep guy that I was like, wow, I really loved watching compared to NBA players.
I'm gonna make sure to tell Nick that, by the way.
No, Nick was my favorite prep guy to watch, 100%. But when you got Cole Anthony and Moses Brown on the other side, it's a little tough. But but no, I mean, those guys, I think definitely it's going to be fun because calling minor league baseball in a couple years down the line, we'll see what major leaguers there will be. And I obviously will call them, in the youngest part of their career. So that's going to be fun to see. But I definitely think broadcasting those guys was a special experience, especially, again, when I'm their age as well, broadcasting their games is really cool.
Yeah, I'm going to just interfere, though, before even asking another question. So Nick and the other prep guys and I had actually been sitting down recently, and we talked about it. And I said one of the craziest things is to look back at our high school years. And, Bailey and I both played on the B team in varsity.
He played.
We were both on the B team in high school, so we didn't get to play against those guys. But we were talking about it, and we said, like, it's crazy to think that back then the CHSAA was known as one of the best leagues in basketball. In all of the United States, it wasn't just one thing. We had, I want to say, at least 20 people in our 4 years that went to the NBA, regardless of who was drafted or not, who are either currently playing in the G League, playing overseas. And to look back and even see the people that played overseas in those years is insane. So it's just funny to think like those years were some of the best years in New York basketball of all time. Obviously you have the guys like Chris Mullin who, played at Xaverian and is one of the best shooters in NBA history. But to now have guys like Jose Alvarado, who was getting Bleacher Report to just post videos of him. And, people didn't even have hopes that he was going to come out of high school and play. You have guys like Nick Richards, who's another guy now who's making a name for shot blocking, went to St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. So to see players like that who, were huge names in high school, were not the best players in college, and now who have names for themselves for, doing big things in the NBA is crazy though.
Yeah, and not to be negative here, but are we ever going to get that again? I don't think so. I think if it's that good, they're going to go to a prep school.
We did have a player. I don't remember his last name. AJ. He did go to prep once around the last couple of our years.
Yeah,
he was a freshman. He was a huge name, but I believe that he had left by his senior year as well.
Yeah,
I know that he was getting recruited. Another player that was pretty big in high school. We ended up not even finishing out his career. Nico Kosmidas. Another big player in high school who didn't even finish because of coaching. And, that's another sad thing to see is, coaching like that. But again, to see that league was the way it was when we went there. And I don't know if it'll ever be the same.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into another question though. So I know that you and I, this is a little off of what we were just asking, but you and I had sat down and we got the chance to speak to Al Trawing. One of the best experience. I had him as a professor in college. So grateful to do so. He had given me a lot of tips about, broadcasting in general. So I have to ask, was there a conversation at any point prior to your career or during your career that had shaped who you are now, not only as a person, but as a broadcaster?
That's a great question. I mean, I try my best to reach out to people in the industry, whether they have the Ithaca connection because I'm a graduate or not, and just cold call them and get them on the phone. But I think specifically for me, it was a mentorship program that I had to invest into, and my parents were, I was very fortunate that my parents would. But for 3 years, I went to technically 3 different camps, but it was pretty much under the same umbrella. But the Bruce Beck and Iron Eagle broadcasting camp. First year, getting to know them was great, and it was more like a, hey, do you want to do this kind of thing? And then for the last 2 years, I went to the advanced camp with Mike Quick, and Mike Quick has been a tremendous resource for me for a long time. And him just putting the confidence in me early in high school that I could do this really helped. I mean, I asked him one day because he's a fixture in tri-state area high school athletics. I just said, hey, Mike, I think it was the Malloy game my senior year, but we're playing Malloy and we would love you to be a part of it. And I think he was planning on attending anyway. So he jumped on the pregame show coverage with us and with an underclassman, and me and Jaden, who I referenced earlier, were calling the game. But then Mike, who didn't have to do this, he decided, you know what, instead of going downstairs, I'm going to watch the game up from the SFP TV studios. And he gave me feedback at halftime. And I was like, he didn't have to do that right on the spot, but he didn't blow up my head saying, oh, you're the greatest I've ever heard, because I wasn't, but he gave me a look that, like, you could do this, like, just keep plugging away. And I was like, all right, and that sort of helped me along. So he's great. And he's a guy that, I've only maybe talked to once or twice a year at this point, just, on my career and what he's doing, but I know I can call him or text him anytime. He's going to respond. And, he's just been great. And there's a lot of people, because that's one specific one, but there's a lot of people that help you along the way. I mean, I could reference professors and people in college, and then even people who I've had one conversation with, just getting on the phone or even over email, that have looked at my stuff, given me feedback. It's all stuff that has helped me, and I'm appreciative for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, right before we get into a few more basic questions, you just mentioned how your parents were always there, helping you out, especially with these camps. So Very vague question, but who would you say your biggest supporter or supporters were throughout, your past 8 years in school, at least?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say my parents. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
they just are. I mean, they've been with me. They know this is it's a dream, obviously, to try and do it at the highest level. But you know, I keep getting jobs. They keep supporting me, and you know, and I know for them too. Maybe or I would say definitely, but you know, they want their son at home more than he is, and I'm not, and I'm 22 and I'm not living at home anymore, which is not a brag because you know, I mean, but like it is.
Hey, all right, Jamie. Okay, we got it, buddy. Yeah.
But it's not to say, hey, sometimes I miss home cooking. Sometimes I miss, hey, you know what? I don't want to do my laundry today. You know what? I don't want to do this. I have to go out and have a job. This sucks. But you know, but they've been so great in supporting me, and you know, whether that be financially or morally or whatever, they've done a great job, and I'm appreciative for it because you know I could understand parents being, and my parents especially, being like, all right, listen, you know, this is tough. Not a lot of people make it. It's hard. It's not great pay. Even when you do make it to higher levels compared to other stuff, like, you know, but it's my dream. It makes me happy, and they know it's what I want to do.
Awesome. So to go into my next question, it's kind of backtracking back to the whole sports thing again. So if they're not the same thing, if they are, that's perfectly fine, obviously. But what was your best call during a game? And if it's not the same thing, what was your favorite call during a game?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I remember, because just to go back for high school for a bit, calling the CHSAA, I believe they were sectionals at the time or whatever the name was, but they were hosted at Prep my senior year, and that was during February break, I think. And my parents were like, oh, we're just going to go down to Florida and have a vacation. I'm like, I'm not going. They're like, what? I'm like, I got to call these games. I got to, it's, you know, like Prep wasn't in it. I think it was Cross, Bishop Loughlin, Malloy, and Christ the King. Malloy, Christ the King was the final. But I'm like, I'm calling these games. You know, you're not stopping me. And Christ the King, Malloy in that final for I guess, and they were both in the playoffs anyway, so it really just meant like they were the BQ champions, which looking back, okay, then they had to play the sectionals or whatever, so they would play other teams, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't the end, but it was a stacked Malloy team, a stacked Christ the King team going at it, and the game came down to a Cole Anthony shot at the buzzer that he missed, and Christ the King won because Tyson Walker hit a 3, and I don't think I had a great like one specific call, but that whole thing was just an awesome game to be a part of. Me and Jaden were doing it. It was, you know, we had 2 or 3 cameras with SFP TV. The file we're trying to find because we've lost it, and we hope it's still on the computers at Prep and they didn't just, you know, discourage it, because like there is video footage of that game, but there's not with us calling it. So hopefully we could find that. But that's probably my favorite. My best, I mean, I like, you know, I like to say it's going to be my next one, hopefully, but that's not okay. Well, you hope, right? But the captains this year making the postseason was great. I think I had a great call of them, you know, moving to the championship game. And then in college, my senior year, the Ithaca women's basketball team won the Liberty League championship, and they're just a dynasty. I mean, every year they're going to the NCAAs, and they just have great players. And I called a buzzer beater then. Grace Cannon won it with a mid-range jumper, and it was just a great experience, you know. And it was so funny too, because there would be underclassmen, and it became a joke, obviously. But my call was like, Cannon for the championship. And then like people at parties would just be like, Cannon for the championship. And at the end, it was so, I don't want to say it was overplayed, but like it became an inside joke where I just thought to myself, I'm like, man, I felt good after I did it. Now I'm like, was it a good call at all? Probably not, but it's my most viewed thing ever. And I guess it's my best. So.
All right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So let me ask now, you know, we were just talking about what your favorite calls are and, you know, what games you think are the best that you've called. So let me ask, do you have a career highlight so far? So, you know, whether it's what you were just saying about, you know, speaking to somebody, getting the advice that you got at halftime, like your top call candidate for the championship. What would you say your career highlight is so far?
Yeah, like I might cheap out on this one, just say my next one. Because I feel like, I mean, like every day gets better, like I'm here in Ohio and I got part-time with 92.3 The Fan, and they were, I was fortunate enough that they sent me to the ALDS and, getting to cover, and I wasn't broadcasting that game obviously, but to be in the building, Yankees, Guardians, a big playoff series, it just felt special. And I feel like, and it's a great feeling, I wake up and like I have a shift tomorrow at the station where I'm just going to do 2020s and, just cut some audio and help the hosts out. And I say just, and I shouldn't say just because it's such a great thing. Yeah. And you never know where where that day is going to take you. A host says, oh, I have this opportunity for you, or they put you on air for a segment or something. So it's fun that like, I feel like, I may have a career highlight, or someone could say, oh, this was him at, I'm 22. Like let's be honest, I'm young. So I feel like, each day is a career highlight, I guess.
So that's actually kind of perfect. It kind of leads into my next question, actually. So with everything you've accomplished so far, you've obviously accomplished a lot. What's the goal for the end of your career?
Yeah, it's funny because I think it's just, hey, this is my job, this is my career, and I keep doing it. I mean, the dream job is the New York Rangers play-by-play position, but which, with Sam Rosen and then Kenny Albert on radio, who's probably going to get bumped up to TV just because I grew up watching. They're still my favorite team. I root harder for them than anybody else, maybe because they've had the most postseason appearances of any team I root for. But it's just like it's a passion, and the fan base I relate to a lot. And it's just, it's a great position, and that was the career aspiration. But, I had a phone call with Brendan Burke, who's the voice of the Islanders. And he told me, he's like, okay, so hypothetically you're the voice of the Detroit Red Wings or the Dallas Stars. Are you going to be unhappy? I'm like, no, like I'm not, like I'm going to be a play-by-play voice of a team in the four major sports. And to return to what I said earlier with Kenny Albert being a guy that, I sort of try and emulate, the ability to call all different sports is something I want to do too. I want to be a guy who, with my career solidified, that I could go to, any sporting event and cover it, and people trust that I'll do a great job. I mean, that's the ultimate dream. And obviously to be financially secure. And I mean, it's looking down the line, but obviously a wife and kids and maybe, I don't know, but we'll see, like this isn't a podcast about my 22 years of exercise, so that, but we'll that's something obviously too. But no matter where I am, like say my 40s and 50s, where I have that job, I just hope it's in sports. I hope it's doing something I love, and I hope I wake up every day and I'm like, hey, you know what? I could be doing something worse.
Yeah. I hope that's everybody's goal, to wake up and say that they could be doing something worse. But my next question is actually going to lead to another one of Bailey's questions. So I think that's a pretty cool question to ask. And again, you've covered so many different things in the last few years, being in high school and being in college. So what has your preparation been like for just in general? How do you prepare for things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It depends on the sport. So for baseball, with the captains, it's, hey, like, and especially me first year, I'm not lying. I didn't know the Guardians prospects at all. There was names to me. I didn't know any of these guys. So you do your research, you Google their name, and then I spent like I had the opportunity, just because of how many players there were. I'm like, all right, this day is dedicated to this guy, and news stories and YouTube videos and whatever. And before the season started, and then when the season starts, you're with them on the bus, in the locker rooms, you get to know them. And luckily in minor league baseball, you produce a 10-page game notes package, which is just a summary of each player and different records and stuff. And for the other teams, you don't have to prep as hard. You have a conversation with their broadcaster before the series. Maybe you read an article or two, but you're not, I'm not going crazy to learn about these different prospects, because I know a lot of info is in front of me, and people who are listening to me want to listen to and hear about the captain's players. That's what they're listening for. In high school, because I would return it here with high school basketball, I was insane because literally, I mean, I didn't have a life. So, I'm like, all right, it's a Friday game, right? It's Monday. Every other high school kid is like, all right, I got to do this assignment. I got to do that assignment. I'm like, all right, I got to do all my assignments. So Wednesday, Thursday could just be about this game. Like that's how it was. And I didn't play a sport in the winter either. I played football in the fall, and then I ran track in the spring a couple times. But in the winter, this is my sport. I'm dedicated to it. So Googling all these guys, looking up their Instagrams at the time, and seeing anything that I could use for on air, like a guy like Cole Anthony. Yeah, I had 10, 15 things I could say about it. The 11th guy on Christ the King's bench. You look up his name on Google, he's a 15-year-old kid. You're probably not going to find anything. So just trying to find something to talk about if they come in. But I think for a basketball game or for a secular event like that, you want to commit double the preparation of how much you're going to be on air, and you want to use about 10% of your stuff. So if you you can't really quantify how much prep you have, but if you feel like, all right, I said 10% of the stuff that's in front of me, that's good. Because if you're saying too much, or you're going and doing 20% of it, the game probably sucked and it was a blowout. And if you're not getting to it at all, then the game was so exciting, you just were worrying about the play-by-play. So I think 10% is a good thing, but basketball and baseball are different. Like basketball, you want to throw in this stat, this nugget. Baseball, it's a long season. You're going to talk about I found myself, it's game 120, whatever. The guy's first at bat, I'm talking about, where he gets his batting gloves, what company, and then, he likes this one. And like, does that matter? Not really. But what else am I going to say about this that I haven't already, unless something happens in the game or something unique in a conversation? And that's the funniest thing too, why like baseball is such a funny sport and is different than all the others, because your whole life is preparation for it. The ability to have just a conversation that's not related about baseball at all with one of these guys, and then it transfers itself over into something I could use on air, with their permission. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything that shouldn't be on air, but even having a conversation about food or pop culture or something that, hey, this is going to be funny or entertaining to someone listening, and it's going to help people get to know the player better, because that's your goal too, to humanize these guys, because most people look at them as, robots for their entertainment.
Awesome. So like Tom said, that question goes into my next question. Was there a difference between preparing to call like someone you've called all 4 years and then someone like just transferring to a new team a few years later? Like, for example, me and Tom both played with JC our freshman year at Holy Cross. And then he left the CHSAA for 2 years and then came back his senior year to Malloy. So you had to call him again. So is there like a difference preparing for someone like that?
No, I think you just do a little more research because you're not in front. It's funny because just like the prep example, I'm not really prepared on the prep guys. I've seen them. So like, what am I going to do? That it's all on the opponent, because you already know one team. And my senior year, just because I was learning more about how to do the job, I would go to practices a couple of times or talk with, at the time, Tim Leary and then Coach Lynch, and, just 1 or 2 minutes conversation with them. But it was mainly on the other team because I'm like, I don't know anything about the other team, especially like, all right, I knew stuff about Cross and I would know the big names of Christ the King, Malloy, but some of the other non-conference teams that they played and the benches of even those big programs, I didn't know anything. So you're more in prep with them, but you definitely, if you haven't seen that person, you want to get a little more research into it. And something that I wish I did in high school that I know now, but didn't know then, go up and talk to these guys, I easily could have on a Wednesday or Thursday just DM'd JC and just been like, hey, I'm calling the game for prep television. I know you're busy. I'm busy. We're both in high school, but like, if you can give me like 10 minutes on the phone that we could talk, that'd be great. Cause I did it with the coaches. I don't know. You will know obviously, but Cross's coach senior year, I got him on a phone interview before.
Was it Brooks at the time? Coach Brooks?
Yeah, that's who. And I got him in his classroom or whatever, and he was great. And I felt the most prepared for prep cross because I talked to him about his team and
Yeah.
and the struggles and the ups and downs of the season and stuff. So you could, and to circle it all back with preparation, you can't go too crazy either. You got to realize that you don't want to just be sitting there and saying, "Oh, did you know this? Did you know that?" You got to make sure you're telling the story of the game as well. Like this is prep for prep cross example. This is prep cross. It sells itself. It's the battle of the boulevard. These guys all grew up with each other and now they're on different sides and this and that. So you can't get too boggled down by it.
All right. And so unfortunately we are on Zoom and, we don't have Zoom Plus, I guess it's called now. So,
hey, we can always restart. I'm here for you guys, whatever you got to do.
I actually only have two more questions. So the first question I want to ask is, you're a very comical person. Grew up being one of the funniest kids I know.
Oh,
so I want to ask if you transfer that onto your on-air performances.
I try. And that's a good word to use too. Performance it is at times,
Yeah.
like I'm not going to do stand up on air and I'm not going to, not talk about the game for 3 innings, especially on radio. But if you're just calling especially with baseball, balls and strikes for 9 innings, it's going to grow tiresome. People are just going to be like, ugh, you want to throw in a little humor, and that helps to have a partner too. And luckily we have with the captains a partnership with John Carroll University where there was 2 interns who got to work with me this year and they were great and they want to do what I do. And they did a great job. Logan and Jake were their names and they did a fantastic job. But I could bounce off them with a conversation, oh, it's 80s night. Hey, what's your favorite 80s movie, during a pitching change or something. And people like that stuff. And if they don't, then, they're happy they could be annoyed at me for not talking about their kid. So as long, because it's funny too, like people, I mean, if you were a Captains fan and you weren't at the game, you had to listen to me. You had no other choice.
Yeah.
You can listen to the opponent or you can listen to me. So, but people like that, especially over 132 game season. It's tough because you're never going to appease everybody. There's going to be people that are like, oh, he talks too much about the game or he doesn't talk about it enough or he made a mistake, so he sucks, whatever. There's nothing I could do about that. I just got to do it to the best of my ability. And, that's it.
Awesome. And the last question I have is, what is your piece of advice to people who are trying to be in the same industry as you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one question I ask people that are older than me. And it's the number one question that people who are younger than me ask. And all it is reps, practice. It's like anything. I mean, if you want to get good at a sport, you practice. If you want to get good at a hobby, you practice. That's it. You find reps, and it doesn't have to be on air. If you go to a high school game and you sit in the last row of the stands and you're not bothering anybody and you have enough space and everything, you call the game to yourself. People may give you looks, whatever, but you're going to get better. And, even so, maybe like a lower college, they'll give you a booth or they'll give you a table to the side that you could broadcast the game. People are looking to help out people. And the only way you get better is by practicing it. And I'm saying, go to the games. You mute the television, you prepare yourself, or what you're going to, the teams that are playing. You call the game to yourself in your own room.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's how you get better, especially when you're young. Like you said it, like, doing 2K games or whatever, or our friends are on Xbox Live and I'm not playing, so I'll just call it. Like there are ways that are going to make you better. That even if obviously video game speed's not pro speed, but hey, I like that phrase I used, or hey, I like that I was humorous, or what, I just listened back to it. I sound like I'm an 8-year-old girl. Maybe I gotta play with my voice a little bit. Maybe I gotta find my voice, because I tell people all the time, and they were like, wow, really? I don't feel like I've found my broadcast voice yet. I'm not doing different voices each night, but I feel like there's still fine tuning that I need to do and different levels that I have to get to. And I'm a harsh critic. I think anyone who does this will say they are. You listen back and you're disgusted with it. Then you listen back again and you're like, all right, it was okay. And then, you can move on with life, but practice makes perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. It's one thing that you start to hear is the repetitions, man. So I heard all throughout college, it's all about reps. And I feel like for me, that's one reason why I do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for, coming on, giving us the time. I know you probably have to go prepare for some stuff. So it's like,
what I'm doing
never
tonight.
mind. Thanks for stopping by.
I still have to make dinner. I'm gonna make dinner. I'm gonna turn on the World Series, and then I'm going to sit back and do nothing for 3 hours. That's my, you know, what the problem is, you know, I talk to my dad about this all the time. I'm gonna be watching and then listening to the broadcasters instead of watching the actual game. It's gonna drive me crazy.
Yeah.
That's who I am. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna be doing tonight.
Awesome. So before we end, I just have to ask, do you have any questions for us?
Oh, it's always a good one. Well, I would say, man, I looked up the podcast Instagram, a lot of followers. How did this come about?
So we actually we didn't buy our followers. Okay.
Okay.
So we had done the Halloween intro, and an account had shouted us out. It's only Halloween stuff. So when we did our intro, an account shouted us out, and you know, a lot of people started following. I did the one of the oldest tricks in the book. You know, Instagram now gives you suggestions. So I would go to another podcast that we follow and just go down the line and follow everybody, and whoever wants to follow us back, you know.
There you go.
It's all an industry and sport thing. So anybody that follows back there, obviously we have our personal followers. And yeah, it just takes posting, following people, reaching out to people. We actually have one of our first ever partnerships coming up in the next few episodes with a clothing company. So
it's awesome.
Yeah. So it's been a journey, and I can't wait to keep going with it.
Yeah, that's great. Because I was just like, oh, look at them. Good for them. it was fun. I'd tell anybody, hop on this thing. A lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you soon, brother.
Absolutely.
All right, brother.
All right.